Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Kendall Bauer. Today's presentation is an Arctic adventure in Greenland presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Colby Brokvist. Colby, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Hi, Kendall. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to have everybody joining us today. I'm excited for the Greenland season. It's 2 weeks until I leave, and our camp staff, they're out there now. They're setting everything up. I understand there's a little bit of snow out there that they're still managing, which is pretty typical in June for the setup. But nothing that's gonna stop them from getting camp set up. So we feel like we're in full swing right now of the season of getting everything going, and it's great to have you here along with us, getting ready to have an excellent time in Greenland. Um, so a few things that we're going to talk about today, it's if you haven't participated in these Snow Before You Go webinars, I'm going to cover a lot of logistics. It's not as much about, the experience and whatnot, but I will give you some context as to how to plan and how to pack and what to expect there. And so we'll talk a little bit about activities and what you'll experience, so you'll know how to plan for those things. But mostly we're talking about the logistics and the operational functionality of your trip here. Um, but with that said, we have to have a little fun here, don't we? And I have a few slides to start you off today that are just to showcase what we're going to get into together. And the first slide here is an evening in Tasiilaq. And this is one of the little communities that we'll stay in when we're in Greenland. It's one of three communities that you'll see in addition to our camp. And you can see it's just wonderfully colorful and surprisingly gorgeous. And we'll get to meet some of the local people here and walk around and explore this community and get to know pardon me, get to know some of the people, get to know the culture. Throughout our whole trip, we're working with local people. Some of them are coming in special to talk to you. Some of them work with us in the camp, and they add a lot of color to the experience. And of course, it's always really important for us at NatHab to be bringing in people that are from those local communities, and not only just supporting the places that we work in, but also bringing those voices in, because it's such an important part of your experience getting to know these areas. And then eventually, after a couple of days, we're going to work our way over to our very remote base camp in Greenland, and that's where everybody's setting up now. And you can see what camp looks like set up, and this is near sunset in this picture. I can tell by the way the light hits the mountains over here, the way that we face, and each one of these little porches is a great place to sit and maybe have a gin and tonic or a hot tea at the end of the day. And sometimes we have whales going by in the fjord that's in front of camp, and it's just a wonderful place to slow down and relax and immerse ourselves. And then during the days, there's all sorts of activities that we can be excited for. And one of the main events, of course, is being out there in Surmuluk Fjord, which means the place with the ice. Because it's highly glaciated and there's just icebergs marching down this fjord system in cooperation with the tidal system that's there. And we'll get out and get to see all of that on each one of your trips. Uh, a couple other little things just to bring us all together on the same page. So we're in East Greenland is where our camp is, and that's where you'll be living and seeing these little communities. The entirety of the east coast of Greenland has 2,500 people that live there. About 2,000 of those people are in the Tisiilaq, Tinit, Kulusuk area that you'll see. And so that little cutout that you see down on the bottom left, that's the area where we'll go, where there's these little communities, and one of the largest fjord systems in Greenland, actually. And if I come in a little bit closer, this is just a quick little map that I made here on PowerPoint, and it shows some of the more specific areas that we'll go to. So you can see Kulusuk down on the bottom right, and that's where the airport is that we'll fly into. Airport's a loose term; it's an airstrip, I guess, but that's where we'll arrive and depart from Greenland in Kulusuk. And then from there, we take a helicopter over to Tasiilaq, which you just saw a picture of. We'll get to spend a day and a half or so there. And then we're going to take a boat through the fjord systems over to camp, which sits on the north side of Amasilik Island. So camp and Tasiilaq are on the same island. It's about 4 hours boat ride to get from one side of the island to the other. And then the days that we're in camp, we'll get to see the third community of Tinnet. We'll get to see Surmullic Fjord and Johan Petersen, and that's where we'll do most of our hiking and kayaking and ice cruising and photography out there. So a quick little orientation to what's going on. So let's get into some of the nuts and bolts, the things that you came here for today. I'm going to start a little bit with packing. We'll start off with packing. And you can see in this picture that there are, is this the correct picture? Yeah, there we go. There was a little bit of a lag. You can see in this picture that people are dressed in different ways, and that's very, very typical. So the weather in Greenland can look like a lot of different things, and some of it depends on what time of year you'll be there with us, and some of it is just that Greenland is a very finicky place, of course, right? We have the North Atlantic systems that kind of come in from the south and from the east, and then we have these cold polar systems that come in across the Greenland ice sheet from the west and from the north down through Fram Strait. And then there's a lot of localized weather as well because the ice sheet is there and there's so much ice, and how much ice is around and in what direction the predominant weather system comes from will highly determine our little microclimates. And even in this little region that I just showed you a map of, it can be doing very different things on any given day. Like there are days when we're in we're in camp and we might have some communication with the people in Tasiilaq, and they'll be like, yeah, we're fogged in and it's raining here, and at camp we're having a brilliant, beautiful day, or the opposite, right? So the take-home message to that is it can be below freezing anytime, but not too much below freezing in the summertime. It can get as hot in the summertime as 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And sometimes we'll be out and we'll be walking around on hikes and we'll have a t-shirt on. And other days we'll be walking around on hikes and people will have everything they own on. And sometimes if it's weather's kind of in between, it really depends on you. Some people run a little cold, some people run a little hot. And I find that people are often in the same place at the same time, dressed very differently depending on how they feel. So knowing this, what does that mean for you? It means that you want to pack a lot of layers. It's nice to be able to adjust yourself when you're out there. And it's typical layering stuff that you're probably used to as nature enthusiasts. You're going to want probably something wool on your base layer, or maybe polypropylene, but certainly not anything cotton or anything like this. What we don't want is to get warm during the day, have to throw on maybe an extra jacket, and then an hour and a half boat ride through the icy fjords. You're going to get cold really fast, and if you're damp on the inside, then that's a comfort as well as maybe even a safety problem. So no cotton under layers when we're there. Wear some nice wool fibers. The other thing that is absolutely mandatory is kind of a heavier jacket, and you'll use that around camp. Like I have a down puffy jacket. Mine even has a hood. That's optional. You can also have a wool hat. That's fine. But for being in and around camp on those cold days, or maybe when we're hiking on a cold day and then we stop, it's nice to be able to throw on something that has a little bit more insulative value to it. And then rain gear. And when I say rain gear, I mean very waterproof gear. It's not the kind of thing where, oh, I hope it doesn't rain on my vacation. Like, it's probably going to rain. It's probably going to get wet. We're going to be out there on the water. We're going to be zipping around at high speed on our Zodiacs and different boat rides and things. And so you want to make sure that you're impermeable to any water that's there. So none of this water resistant stuff. You want heavy Gore-Tex, waterproof parka, and waterproof pants to go with you. Now, with that said, there's this caveat, and actually I just mentioned being on the Zodiacs with your rain gear, but in fact, we wear what's called Mustang suits and there's a few different reasons for that. And a Mustang suit, if you're not familiar with it, it's a float suit as well as a waterproof suit as well as an insulative suit. And so the people that are on the left in the orange and black in this picture, they're wearing those Mustang suits. And they're wonderful pieces of clothing. They keep us comfortable when we're zipping around out there on the ice, especially on our long transits. But they also act as our flotation and our insulation. And so it's a bit of safety gear if someone were to fall in the water, which has never happened during our Greenland trips. But if that happened, then you can be in those frigid, cold polar waters for a good period of time inside these suits. And so they protect us from all the elements, and we use those whenever we're zipping around. Now, when we get to some of the landings, some people still prefer to keep those Mustang suits on because they're so warm and comfortable. That's the case with this picture of these nice folks. We're just doing a quick little landing, and we're overlooking a glacier and having a little snack. We're not really hiking anywhere, and they work really well for keeping us comfortable. When it's time to hike, they're just too hot and they're too bulky. And so we take those off, we store them inside the boats, and then we go for a hike. And that's where you'll need the rest of your rain gear and the rest of your layers when then we're on land. So that's a little bit about the Mustang suits. And then other things to think about, certainly a warm hat, like a wool hat, toque kind of thing, a sun-brimmed hat of some sort. Some people prefer the ones that come all the way around. Some people just like the front brim. Either way is just fine. And then gloves. And gloves is another one that I would say falls into the choose your own adventure category. If you're the kind of person that gets cold hands quickly, and prefers to be warm rather than a little chilly, then you might want a large glove, even like you would wear going skiing. And we have a lot of people that show up with ski gloves, waterproof ski gloves, and they work really well. People that are like me that run a little warmer, I tend to have a medium weight glove that's a little bit more nimble. And then I also have a lightweight glove, and I recommend everybody take a lightweight glove as well. And this is useful for when you're doing things. If it's a little chilly out and you're trying to eat lunch or you're trying to use your camera, whatever it might be, then you have something that you're a little bit more nimble with. And then also that second pair of gloves acts as a backup just in case something happens with your primary pair of gloves and they get wet. You have something to back yourself up with. So those are typical pieces of gear that you'll want to take. I think everything else is on the gear list that is in the pre-departure briefing that I know our concierge sent. So for a complete list of things that you should and shouldn't bring, check that out. And I say shouldn't because, well, I'll talk about it. I'll foreshadow right now. I'll talk about it in a couple of minutes. But there's some pretty strict restrictions for weights of our gear. And that's primarily for the helicopter portions of our trip, but also the little regional plane that we're on coming in and out of Kulisuk. They also have restrictions. So I'll talk about that in a second. But the trick is to have enough layers that you can choose your gear, but don't pack tons of stuff. You don't need an extra shirt for every day. You do not need an extra pair of pants for every day. You're going to recycle those clothes. And then you can do laundry again when you get home or when you get to Reykjavik or something like this. So we want to make sure that we're staying within the restrictions, but we have enough layers to work with. Let's see, a couple other things. Footwear always comes up. Now, some of you have perhaps traveled before in Antarctica, maybe in Western Greenland or Iceland, and you might be used to having rubber boots when you're out for landings and things. Rubber boots are not something that we recommend for this trip. In fact, we recommend against it. We recommend a good pair of waterproof hiking boots. And in some cases, it's even nice to have just a good pair of running shoes. So most of the guides, what we have is a pair of running shoes, and we use that for transiting back and forth from Iceland and to the different towns. It's nice for hiking in the Valley of Flowers if it's not a rainy day when we're in Tisilak. And then when we get out to camp and we're doing some of the bigger hikes and there's no trail systems back there, then we're wearing our boots. And it's nice to have a pair of waterproof boots because on the shoreline, it is possible that we get splashed or something like this. And then also some of the areas that we go to, particularly in the early season, they can be wet. Some of the meadow systems and whatever, they can be wet. And so that'll keep your feet warm and dry by having a pair of boots. The landings themselves, even though we're water-based for most of this trip, the nature of our fjord system is that we're in very protected waters and we're not getting in and out of the boat on beaches where there's like maybe some surf coming in and this sort of thing like you might be used to navigating in some of those other polar areas. And then the other thing is most of our landings, we're able to just pull right up to rock outcrops and just step from the boat onto the rock outcrops. We don't actually really have to get our feet wet. And I'll put an asterisk on that. We fly by the seat of our pants often on these trips, and there are certainly sites that we love and utilize that you will land on the beach. And in those cases, we have ways to keep you dry, and you don't need to bring the big rubber boots. Okay. Let's see. The last thing about gear, I know I've been sitting on this slide for a little while, but these are the slides that I have of people wearing clothes, and then we'll move on. But the last thing about gear is we do have some other activities that require specialized gear for our trips. So let me talk a little bit about those and what you may or may not need to bring for those. And it's mostly a list of things you don't need to bring because we know you have luggage restrictions. So kayaking, for instance. So when you go kayaking, we have full dry suits. I'll show you a picture in a few minutes, but we have full dry suits for everyone. We have kayaking PDFs for everyone. We have neoprene gloves for everyone. We have neoprene booties for everyone. And we have extra dry bags in camp. So you can put anything that you want inside a dry bag. And you can use that dry bag anytime we're in and out of camp. So for all the Zodiac rides and all of the kayaking. So you don't need to worry about any of that specialized gear for kayaking or to keep your stuff dry. We have all of that set for you. And then we're going to go on a glacier walk. And we also have helmets and little crampons that go on our shoes for that. So you don't have to worry about bringing anything like this. Sometimes, people will show up thinking, oh, I'm going to this very icy place, and you'll bring like a little pair of micro spikes or yak tracks or something. I can guarantee you that those are not necessary at all whatsoever. You won't be in a situation where you're going to be on that much snow or you need that much extra traction. So don't bring that stuff at all. And then lastly, well, no, two more things. Let's see, a headlamp. So for those of you that are on the late season trips, and it only applies to the late season trips because the early and mid season trips, it doesn't really get dark. Uh, but the late season trips, you may want a headlamp. Now, we do have headlamps and lights inside each one of your cabins, so you're welcome to use our headlamps when you're there at camp. And it's a really nice way, again, to not have to pack that thing with you. Um, if you're going to be on a photo trip, then you may want a headlamp of your own that you can use during the duration of the whole trip. Because as we know, if we're doing any star photography or northern lights things or early morning setups, then you might want to have a headlamp so you can see what you're doing out there in the darkness. So that can be useful for you folks. But most people don't need to worry about a headlamp, and we do have them in camp that you can use. And then lastly, the luggage. And so note in the pre-departure briefing that it talks about having a soft-sided water-resistant piece of luggage. The soft-sided portion of that is critical. And we need that for moving things around inside the helicopter and whatnot. That packs really well. If you have something that's big and heavy and stiff, it's more likely to not sit well with everything else and roll around or fall out, and you don't want that. So make sure that it's a soft-sided something that can be packed really well with everything else that's there. And then the upgrade on that, and I wouldn't go out and necessarily buy it if you already have a piece of soft-sided that works for you. But if it's waterproof, that helps a lot, or water resistant. So for instance, I have a selection of North Face and Patagonia bags, and you've probably seen these like rubberized duffel bags. And that's really nice because your luggage is going to be sitting out on the runway waiting for a helicopter to pick it up on some days. It's going to get moved by boats in a couple different places. It's going to have to get transported from the shore up to camp. And so your luggage will spend time outside. And it's nice if it's a really rainy day, of course, it's nice to have something that's water resistant. So that's a very useful upgrade that I highly suggest for you. Okay, great. Let's see, most of my slides will move faster than this slide. So let's go now to the airport. And the Reykjavik airport is an international airport. It's pretty busy, but it's also very, very small. And so it makes it very, very convenient for you when you're coming and going to Reykjavik. It's typical of any other international airport. You'll show up, you'll go through immigration, you'll go through customs. It's very simple, and the airport itself is small, so it's really easy to get around. They have luggage carts that are there, so look for the carts. You don't have to carry your things around; they're free. You can just throw your stuff on the cart and then work your way through the system there. We have your transportation organized for you. And the arrow that you see in this picture, you'll see that there's a series of buses sitting right outside the main door of the airport. And when you come out of customs, those signs will be up there for the fly bus, And the fly bus is the one that's going to take you from the airport into Reykjavik to your hotel. And you'll just walk right outside with that cart and your luggage, talk to the people to make sure that you're getting on the right bus. They have excellent customer service. There's always drivers there, and just check that you're on the correct bus. And then they'll load you onto the bus and you go. So the airport, super easy. Yeah, nothing really out of the ordinary. If you did need a snack or something when you arrive, there's a couple nice little cafes you can buy. A little bits of food, get yourself a coffee or a smoothie or whatever it is. Those fly buses, they're running about every half an hour or so. So if you don't have to rush out to it when you get there. If you want to take time, get yourself settled into Iceland, have a little snack or something. As I know some people come in on very early flights and whatnot, and it's also a very convenient system, so no sweat there. These are the buses that you're looking for. So when you come outdoors, it's going to look just like this. You can see these people, they're rolling their luggage. You might have one of those carts. Just come right over to the fly bus. They're very comfortable. There's bucket seats, each one. You'll get a little bucket seat. There's Wi-Fi on board the fly bus, and it takes about an hour to get to your hotel. Well, actually, I'll talk about that. It takes about an hour to get into Reykjavik. And then something's going to happen. So when you get on the fly bus, they're also going to check to make sure you're on the right bus because you have your reservation. And then they're going to give you a slip of paper, and it's going to be colored. And what happens is the fly bus takes you to the main bus terminal that's right in the center of Reykjavik, like right off the main drag where all the hotels are. It's just a couple minutes away from your hotel and the big Basilica Church, that you've probably seen that looks like the basalt columns. And they'll drop you off there. And from there, what you'll do is you'll grab your luggage. You're going to walk straight through the bus terminal. And then there's going to be small shuttle buses that can navigate the city more readily on the other side of the terminal. And that colored piece of paper that you have informs you to which bus you get on. So if you have a blue tag, you get on the blue bus. If you have a green tag, you get on the green bus. And that all that designates is that it's going to a particular part of town. It's the Reykjavik Excursions is the company. It's their own system for just segmenting the city so they can efficiently get you to where you need to go and not have to drive all over the place with a million people. And it's 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how many people are in your neighborhood that they're dropping off from that bus station. So the bus station is BSI, Bravo Sierra Indigo, BSI. So they'll drop you off on the fly bus at BSI, and then you'll get on the local bus with your color. Super simple. Other transportation things to think about. I'm not going to go in order of your trip the whole time, but I'm going to categorize everything. So we're talking about just transportation in general and some other things to think about. So on the top, you can see the small regional plane. This is the one that's going to take us from Iceland over to Kulusuk and then back again. They're very comfortable. It has everything you'd expect from a regional plane. It's also very small, like a regional plane. It's very tight in there. There's not a lot of room for big carry-ons and things like this. There's a little bit of room in the overhead bins for small bags. If you have a larger like camera bag like I have, then you can expect to have that under your seat when you fly. So it really behooves you to narrow down what you're going to take when you go over to Iceland. At your welcome dinner, when you arrive on the first night, when you meet your expedition leaders and the rest of your group, the expedition leaders will go through some specific guidance for preparing everything that you'll need when you get to Iceland, and then how to best pack that and organize yourselves. But what you need to know now is that there is a 13-pound carry-on limit for this flight. And I'll put an asterisk on this too, because on paper, there's a 13-pound limit, which is not very much. In reality, we take our bags with us that have all kinds of stuff in them. And I find that if you can make your bag look small, then they don't bother to weigh it or do anything with it. And then we have some other tricks for people like photographers. Like what I'll do when I go to the airport and I check in is I just put my bigger lenses in my pocket, or I have it in my jacket and I leave it on the cart. And then when I go up, if anybody asks me to weigh my bag, not all my stuff is in my bag. That's the trick. And then you can put your things back in your bag when it's time to go on the plane. So we have some But if you're grossly over that, they're going to call you out on that, and they're going to make you leave some things behind. So it is something that they have the right to deny you passage if it's over, but usually that doesn't happen. So don't stress over it. My bag, for instance, weighs about 21 pounds, and I've never had any problem getting it on. Uh, anyway, just so you know. The other thing about those bag restrictions is on the way back, when we come from Kulisuk back to Reykjavik, they will also look to check your weight there. And it happens, I would say, 1 out of every 15 or 20 times that they actually weigh our carry-on bags. But it's the same thing, that when they do it, they're pretty serious about it. The thing is over there, they know that you can't leave anything behind and get it back. And so instead, they charge you a lot of money as a penalty. So it'll be somewhere around $120 as a penalty, and then they're still going to make you take your things and put them in your checked bag and not carry them on with you. Again, it behooves you to think about weight and try to minimize what you have, and don't risk all of that rigmarole. And then your main luggage, this is for the regional flight as well as the helicopter, 45 pounds for your main luggage bag. That's what they're expecting that to come in at. Okay, yeah, that's what I have to say about those flights then. Let's talk about accommodations a little bit. When you're in Reykjavik, we stay at the Hotel Saga. It's a newly renovated hotel. It feels very, very new, right in the middle of downtown. Everything that you might want to do in Reykjavik is within walking distance here. You can get to the harbor, you can get to the museums, you can find all the good restaurants, and just all the cool. It's a vibrant, cultural, fun city to be in, and so you're right there in the middle of it all. It's great. All the typical services you'd expect. There's a small little shop in there. There's a full restaurant. They do breakfast and everything for you. There's Wi-Fi, like everything you would imagine in a nice European hotel. That's what you can expect there. Yep. And if you don't want to take breakfast there, right across the street is one of the best bakeries around, and it's exceptional. You can go find that just on the opposite corner from the hotel. When we get into Greenland, the status changes a little bit. We stay at the very best hotels that Greenland has to offer. There's one in each town, and so that's where you'll be. And they're really nice, actually. You can see, looking at Hotel Amasiluk on the left and Hotel Kulisuk on the right, you can see that they're just riddled with windows all over the place, and they both face out over the water. And so we'll have icebergs and sometimes even whales, and the boats are coming in and out. And the one Hotel Amasiluk, we look down on the city, so the views are wonderful. They both have a buffet that we go to for our meals, and they all have Wi-Fi. And this year we're told that the Wi-Fi will be free. That's new for this year, and it's free because the whole town now has 5G, which is also new for this year. So we'll see how well that's functioning when we show up. In the past, cell reception has been kind of iffy, and Wi-Fi has been really difficult when there's a lot of people in the hotels. And I say that because if you have any important business or important communications or this sort of thing, in the past we've always said don't count on it. If you're patient enough over time, then we can feed out emails and all this sort of stuff. But it does sound like now it should be a big improvement with a 5G system and a lot more bandwidth. So I think we can expect that, but until I see it actually work, I can't make any promises for you there. Yeah. And yeah, other than that, everything you'd expect from the hotels. The hotel managers are wonderful. There's a lot of hospitality and just great people. They're good places to be. Both of these hotels function as the center of everything that's happening. So, as an example, sometimes when we're in Kulisuk, we'll have researchers that are doing work up on the ice sheet come down, and we get to talk to them about their work, and you just never know who's going to be in these places. A lot of people adventuring. Some people we have people pretty regularly in Hotel Amasiluk that are going to go across the Greenland ice sheet, and so we're there with all these expeditioners. It's good fun. And then of course camp. and camp is the main event here for us. Camp has everything that you would expect in a luxury camp in, say, Africa. Yeah. So everyone has their own private cabin. Within those cabins are your own private dry toilets and wash basins and this sort of thing. They have a bunch of blankets and comforters and sheets and everything in there, so staying warm is not an issue, as well as nice heaters that we manage for you. So you'll have your own space you can come back to. You can hang out on the porch. We'll bring you tea in the morning, these sorts of things, and it's a wonderful place to be. A couple things to say about camp. While you have bathrooms inside your cabins, the showers are in a special shower house because camp is broken up and packed away every single year and then rebuilt. The plumbing and the pressure systems, it works better as one unit. And so there's a shower house with a men's side and a women's side. There's two showers on each side, and it's really easy for us to all coordinate with each other when we're in and around camp to take showers. So you can plan on that. We have camp shoes. So we were thinking about packing and preparing for camp and trying to minimize all the things that you have to bring from home. And so we have really nice clogs for you to wear around camp. And in fact, we prefer that you wear them around camp because they don't have any tread on the bottom of them. And so we can keep everything clean. So those will be there waiting for you at camp as well. Yeah. I think that's. Oh, and then when we get to camp, this year there is also now Wi-Fi service at camp. We put in a Starlink system because it's great risk management and it's great for logistics and be able to communicate with people and make things work a little more efficiently for camp. And that also means that you'll have access to Wi-Fi. Me personally, it's a bit heartbreaking for me. I see a big change in people when they just let their phones go for a while, and I hope you're some of those people that can come and appreciate being in camp and just enjoying being in camp and disconnecting and letting things go because it's just so incredibly powerful to be present and not keep being sucked into whatever's happening at home or in the news or these sorts of things. But if you're the kind of person that wants or needs to check in with people at home, if you have things going on, then know that you'll be able to do that from camp this year. So no stress over that. Yeah, good. Okay, and then that takes us to food. I have a couple pictures of food from camp because it's far and away the best food that you're going to find. We have our chef Mary, who comes from British Columbia. She's been in camp with us in the past, and she's here again. And it's absolutely incredible the stuff that she's able to put out there for us in camp. Mary also likes to use local foods. And so, we might have greens that we collect or berries that we collect. There are local fishermen that are around and they'll bring us cod or char that they've caught. So it's fun to see some of that stuff worked into the menu that are local dishes. In camp, all your dietary needs, anything that's happening, Mary is well aware because you let the adventure concierge know. So if you haven't already gone on to your adventure portal and submitted your own dietary preferences or needs, please go ahead and do that. They're preparing all the menus and the orders and everything now already. And so guarantee that we can take care of you because we can't just go to the grocery store out there. It's just whatever shows up with us when we show up is what we have to work with. So we're happy to take care of any needs. It's easy for us to do. We just need to know about it in advance. So just let us know. And then that takes us to food for the rest of the trip. Of course, in Reykjavik, it's a cosmopolitan European city. You can get whatever you want. There's all kinds of restaurants if you're coming in on your own. And then the meals that we have organized as part of your trip, we're again taking into account any of those dietary needs that we know about. And then lastly, it's the hotels that are in Kulusuk and Tisilac. And these places are tricky. So I'm a person that has a lot of dietary requirements as well. They're real needs, not preferences, and it's very, very difficult for me to eat there. And I find that they put out a buffet that has a lot of different foods, and you have to just kind of choose your own adventure at those buffets. And depending on what comes out on any given day, I might have a lot of just one or two things. Other days, I feel like I can put together a whole meal, and it works really well. The reality is that it's very difficult to get food and provisions there. They're often running out of things. Supply ships can't get in because there's so much ice or there's some kind of operational delay coming from Denmark. And so food is a big challenge. And then also, Greenlanders eat a lot differently than how we eat. And so the hotels are catering to an international community. They've brought in additional things. It looks more like a European kind of buffet setup rather than something that you would find in America. So there's a lot of food, there's a lot of different kinds of things, but depending on how limited your own dietary restrictions are, you're going to need to navigate those buffets a little bit. So talk to your expedition leaders when you show up at your welcome dinners and make sure that they know if there's anything different than what's on your forums about how you eat and especially what you like to eat. And if we need to supplement anything prior to going to Greenland, then we only have that time when we're in Reykjavik to do it. By the time we arrive into Greenland, if there are any issues, we have to work with what they already have provisioned. So get in touch with concierge early and we can take good care of you. All right, not too much more to go, everybody here. So I was asked to talk just a little bit about activities to give us all a sense of what to expect when we're there. And so here's a group of mine from last year, and this is in one of our hiking areas. You can notice how people are dressed on this day. It was cool but not cold, right? We have some layers on, but very, very comfortable, easy to walk around in. If you look at the terrain, that terrain is very typical. People always ask like, oh, what's it like to get around? And we hear from people about because it's hard to imagine, right? Like what things are going to be like in a place that you've never been before. And what we found with the hiking here is that it's not about how long you can hike or how far that you can hike, but can you manage being like nimble and mobile and flexible, like kind of over all of this uneven terrain. There are very few places in Greenland where there is a trail. If it is a trail, it's more like a path. And there's always things to navigate. But to get from place to place, we're walking up over rock outcrops and through meadows and around stuff. I have one more picture to show you. So these two pictures that I'm showing you are very classically the types of things that we're walking over. And so in this one, you can see that the path that we're on here, it's made up of a lot of like kind of crumbly rock and bedrock. And then from there, we go into a meadow system. And so most of the hikes that we're doing, this combination of some fairly rugged terrain mixed in with some meadow walking here and there. But most of it's pretty rugged. We walk slowly. We have trekking poles for everybody. It's another thing you don't. Let me qualify trekking poles. So in Tisilak and in camp, we have trekking poles for you. In Iceland and in Kulusuk, we do not have trekking poles. The reason is because we're not doing any longer hikes in those areas. So if you're somebody that really needs the trekking poles for stability all the time, then you might want to bring yours. If you're the kind of person that needs trekking poles or just wants them when we're on uneven kind of chunky terrain, then when we're in those kind of areas, we do have the trekking poles for you, so you don't have to pack those. Yeah, good thing about trekking poles. Anyway, that's what to expect in terms of this. Now, you don't have to do anything. Of course, you can always opt out of anything. We do our very best to organize walks and activities to give people options when we can. And sometimes we can, everybody, and sometimes we can't. And the reason that we can't sometimes is because of the polar bears in polar bear management. Some of the areas that we go to, they're more complex, or maybe we're hiking further from the shore, and it takes at least two expedition leaders, if not the two ELs and maybe even a local guide to manage bear safety well. And that means that the group needs to hike together. And so if we're doing a longer hike over rugged terrain and you don't prefer to do that hike, then we might be able to do something like, take you for a little Zodiac cruise, or You can hang out. A lot of people just hang out on shore actually and read. So we can give you options like this. In other areas that are easier for us to manage the bear safety things, then we might be able to split up into a group that's going to go maybe a little faster, a little bit farther, and another group that's going to be a little bit more wandery if there's complex terrain. So we do our very best to make those options accessible to you. And thanks for understanding that it's not always possible because polar bear safety has to come first in a lot of cases. Yeah. Uh, Other activities that we do. We have zodiacs and we go zodiac cruising. We spend time on the ice, taking pictures of the ice. It's amazing being out there with it. We're looking for whales. We're looking for seals, these sorts of things. And yeah, the ice cruising is just incredible. And sometimes we're going specifically to just, hey, let's just spend some time in the ice together. Other times we'll be going from place to place and we're still passing a lot of ice. There's just tons of it out there. So sometimes we're targeting the ice, sometimes we're seeing it when we're in transit. There's plenty of it around. Yeah, and then wildlife. Whales are going to be the most common form of wildlife. I think I can say honestly that Southeast Greenland isn't renowned as a wildlife destination. You can see all kinds of things, and if I look at my wildlife list over the years, it's all the things that you would expect to see in the Arctic. But there aren't a lot of resources. You'll discover when you get that there are very few meadow systems, that there's a lot of ice built into the interiors of the fjord systems. Most everything is bare rock and high passes. And then the ice sheet, of course, like pouring down in. And so these like rocks and ice sheets act as a barrier to a lot of animals moving around. So we have small numbers of a lot of things, but then large numbers of whales typically. So we tend to see a lot of whales and small numbers of everything. And we always take the time, of course, on NatHab trips to spend time with a fox or a gyrfalcon or with ptarmigan or whatever the other animals are that we might be finding. There's also pretty good birding, especially on the Tisilac-Kulusuk side that faces the Atlantic. So if you're a birder, then it's wonderful birding up there. We might be able to grab some special Arctic species for you. Another activity would be kayaking. Again, we have all the kayaking gear for you. This year we have a brand new fleet of kayaks showing up. So there's a selection of tandem boats and we have some single boats. So we hope to be able to offer more singles. We can't promise singles to everybody, but we usually get out twice or so on kayaking. And so we rotate through, and if people are interested in single boats, we do our very best to make sure that those that are interested have the opportunity to paddle one if we can. It comes down to group numbers and how much interest is there, but we do our very best on that for you. And again, we have all the gear for you. If you've never kayaked before, this is the kayaking experience for you. Not only is it just mind-blowing to be out there in this landscape and with the ice and whatnot, but they're just nice, wide touring boats. Like you're not going to be like the Greenland Inuit where you have to do rolls and all kinds of fancy things. There's no real technique that's needed. There's a rudder, so the rudder helps you steer. You don't need to know anything about the paddles or anything. Just kind of put the paddle in the water, go forward, and use the rudder to steer. And they're super difficult to turn over. So we do that on purpose so we can get out there and we can just enjoy being there. The kayaking is a really nice way to experience the landscape in a very quiet, more intimate way. It's nice to be a little bit physical and move around out there rather than just riding around in the zodiacs. But you don't have to really think about kayaking. It's really just about being in that place. And these kayaks are a nice accessible way to do that together. Yeah, and then of course experiencing the local communities that are there, meeting the local people. We spend time in each one of the three communities going around, particularly when we're in Tasilac. When we first arrive, the main thrust of what we're doing there is exploring that community and learning about people and how they live and the history of East Greenland. And we bring in some exploration history as well as just what life would have been like historically versus now, and that transition that's occurred over time. So lots of time for that. And then a nice little finale to the trip is when we're in Kulusuk on the last day, we're going to zip over. There's a nearby glacier, and this glacier is appropriate to get up and walk around on together. And it's super fun, and we get to get right up close to the ice and see some of these interesting features that are helping to carve the landscape and form the landscape today. And we do that. We hire some local mountain guides that are with us, And so they're out there every day on the glacier, and they have a good feeling for what's happening with the ice and with the environment. And so they'll be the leaders for us on that day. Really great guys. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about here is photography. So we do have a photography specific trip that occurs at the end of the season, but we have photographers that that are excited about their art over the course of the whole season. And so let's talk a little bit about that. For me, I like to pack light, right? The more gear that you have, the more it slows you down, the less creative you become because you're always thinking about, I got to do this lens for that and this lens for that. A small kit allows you to be nimble. It allows you to be creative. It's also nice because, sometimes when we're in the boats, it's cold, it's wet, like you don't want to be messing with a lot of your gear. And then also we have luggage restrictions, right? And so minimizing your kit is really useful. So there's a few different options that you can take and kind of choose your own adventure. One is a wide angle lens is really useful. So something, maybe in the range of like 18 to 24 millimeters. Anything that's in there is really nice. It's great for when you're on the kayaks. It's great for when we're up close to stuff. The glacier shots and like some of the big landscapes. It works really, really well to have something wide. And then just these general adventure travel and camp stuff, like you can use those wide angle lenses to get people or objects and some of the landscape in the background. And so as a really interesting, fun travel lens, a wide angle can be really, really useful. The next one would be something mid-range, anything from 24 to 70 or 105 even, something in that range. It can be a prime lens or it can be a zoom. And these are the kind of workhorse lenses that I think a lot of people are used to using and can appreciate. And then lastly would be a telephoto lens. And people go back and forth on the telephotos because they're heavier and bulkier. And I'm thinking in terms of a 100 to 400, I certainly wouldn't bring anything larger than a 400 with me. And that can be useful for some of the wildlife stuff. But again, know that our trips are not wildlife heavy. So it's not like you're going to Africa taking pictures of animals all the time. But if you wanted to take pictures of animals, that's a great lens for that. And then I also find that those longer lenses are really nice of taking, some compressed landscape shots. So if you're into that sort of thing where you're looking at different layers, or you're looking at maybe a small boat, it's our friends in the other Zodiac with a big landscape, those long lenses can add some compression to great effect and make some really, really nice, actually like landscape photos that you're taking from a distance with the lenses. And those things work really well there. And so for me, I would say all three of those style lenses has usefulness. I would pick two of those and take them with you. Thinking about the photography specific trip, this trip is at the end of the season and it's dark enough at the end of the season that you may get some northern lights. It's not guaranteed, but if this happened, that wide angle lens and hopefully a fast lens, like a 1.8 or something like this, will allow you to take much nicer pictures of the northern lights. I say that with, hey, you can grab a Samsung phone these days and bang it off just as easily if the lights are bright enough. But if you're trying to get that really nice picture with your professional gear, that wide angle, a prime lens is best, and something really fast is going to be your best northern lights lens. So think about that if you're showing up late. The other thing that comes up all the time with photography is tripods. Tripods can be useful, again, late season for these northern lights kind of stuff. And I I don't personally take it because I don't want to haul my tripod around all the time. But if these kind of shots are important to you, then it's probably worth taking your tripod with you. Um, Otherwise, the other use for a tripod might be in some of the meadow systems where there are little waterfalls and cascades. If you want to slow down your shutter speed and blur some water, then again, if you're interested in those specific kind of shots, then maybe a tripod is useful. Otherwise, a tripod is not very useful for us. It ends up being something heavy and awkward, and you're in boats and planes and helicopters and traveling around and trying to have stuff on your back, and they end up being such a burden to carry, and they're also really not light. So thinking about your luggage restrictions. So if those specific shots I mentioned are really important to you, please bring a tripod. If not, don't worry about the tripod. Now in camp, we also have two tripods. So if we're in camp and the northern lights come out, we can take turns using those tripods. So to be clear about that, we don't have a tripod for everyone to just use and take. We have two tripods that a photo group can share if the northern lights come out, or any other time that you want to use it. When we're at camp, you're welcome to use those. They can come out on activities with us or anything like this. So, again, if you're the person that likes the blurry creek pictures, you can use the tripod that we have in camp during the day and not have to travel with it for the rest of the time. But just know that everyone has access to sharing that tripod. Yeah. And Kendall, I think that's what I have here at the 50-minute mark. Thank you, everybody. Guainak. Guainak is the East Greenlandic word for thank you. So thank you for being here. And shall we open it up to some questions, Kendall?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Colby. You really brought back a lot of memories to my time there. I went on Nat Hab's first ever season back in, what was that, 2015? I was on the last departure. It was just the greatest. I had the best time. So thank you.
Yeah.
We do have a few questions here. And if anyone does have a question for Colby, I want to remind you, you can submit that in your control panel in the questions field. If we don't have time to get to your questions today, please be sure to get in touch with someone at the office. If you're booked, concierge can help you, or you can speak to an adventure specialist if you want to get booked. All right. So someone wanted a little bit more information about what you meant by we manage the heaters for you. Does that mean that they can adjust temperatures themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Funny little side comment I picked up on, but yes, anybody can be as warm or as cool as they prefer. The heaters that are in there are they're a very specific type of heater that we got from a community of people that runs research um, camps in the high Arctic. And so these things they function really well, and they're very temperamental. So one of the rules in camp, there's not many of them, but one of them is that we touch the heaters. But we're always happy to adjust as anybody needs warmth or coolness. No problem at all.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you. Someone watching is allergic to black flies, and they're wondering if Greenland has any of those, and if so, when.
We do not. There are midges, there are mosquitoes, but we don't have black flies. Midge and mosquitoes, they're usually kind of they're kind of right now through mid July, and some of them persist till late July, depending on where they are. Like some of the areas that have snow that melts out a little later, uh, they'll have a little bloom later. I didn't mention actually, Kendall, we do have bug nets for everybody. That's something else that you don't need to bring. We'll issue those when we get to Tasiilaq, and then you'll give them back to us in Kulasug. You can keep them for the whole time. In my experience, like it's, like we might get somewhere where it's like, oh, I'm going to put these things on now, and we all have them on. But for the most part, we're not wearing them very much. But when we do have them, it's nice to have them, of course, right? And
Hmm.
it depends on you. Some people, one or two mosquitoes might drive you nuts, and so you might want that more often than anybody else. And that's totally up to you.
Yeah. Someone was wondering about how many days of the trip feature boat rides or excursions. How often are you on the water?
Yeah, good question. So this year we've added, because of the flight schedule for Iceland Air, we've added a boat trip for whale watching and bird watching to our first morning together in Reykjavik. So that's one. Um, let's see. Then the next day we fly and there's nothing. The next day we're in Tisilac and there's nothing. And then yeah, then the next day we go to camp, and then all the days we're in camp. So another two, three, four, and then yeah, so 7 out of the 10 days we're going to be on a boat at some point.
Okay, great. So over to hiking, what's the average mileage of these hikes? What can people expect?
They're exploratory hikes, right? Like I would say, yeah, it kind of really depends. But I would say if I had to throw out an average, like maybe a mile and a half to 2 miles, and the longest hikes that would be possible there are probably 3.5 miles. And at that point, you run into a rock cliff or the ice sheet or the ocean. Those would be the longest hikes.
Uh, there were a couple questions here about electricity. There's electricity at the camp, and some people are wondering about outlets, what they should expect in terms of adapters to bring.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So in camp, everything is US. We have it rigged up specifically for that. Um, so yeah, when you're in camp, everything is all the power is up in the yurt. You don't have an electrical outlet in your cabin, but we do all of our charging and computer things and slide presentations and everything out of the yurt. So it's really easy, and there's tons of charging stations all around there. We can all plug in all of our stuff. There's plenty of room for it. Outside of that, then you need the European plug, and I don't want to tell you the wrong one. I think I know the one, but I'm not going to tell you. But it's in the pre-departure briefing that you were sent, and it'll tell you which of the two-prong European ones, because there's two different ones. It's like an I and a C, I think. But in Greenland and in Iceland, that same adapter will work for you.
Great. What about binoculars? Should people bring binos?
I love binoculars. Yeah, it's nice when you're wildlife watching. It's nice when you're bird watching. Sometimes there's things to see, like you can hold up your binoculars and you can see all the crevassing and features that are up on the glaciers. They're really nice. Um, I don't know. As a nature enthusiast, I always have binoculars with me, uh, but you don't. They're not mandatory to have.
Mhm. Um, what about hydration systems for hiking? Should people plan on bringing backpacks or any like camelbacks or anything like that?
Yeah, Camelback or a water bottle, either one of those things works fine. If you're the Camelback kind of person in the late season, you just want to make sure that you're bringing that stuff indoors at night and not leaving your backpack outside so it doesn't freeze, because it does get quite cold by the end of the season. But other than that, I would say either one. Personally, for me, I'm a water bottle kind of person because a water bottle doesn't break and leak and do all the things. You don't have to manage it. But I know some people prefer those Camelbacks and they're just fine too.
Mhm. And for hiking, would trail shoes work instead of boots, or would you recommend something with more support?
I go back and forth. So I'll like to be perfectly honest. I have both. I've used both on different years. Yeah, if you're the kind of person that has really good stability and support, like you're not thinking about, oh, I just want something lighter to carry, but that you actually physically don't need the extra ankle support that comes along with that, you could get by with like a kind of like a heavy, chunky kind of hiking shoe. Um, Still make it waterproof, but the reason that I prefer boots actually is because when we're in these wet meadows and stuff sometimes, that having the higher ankle keeps water from coming in. That sometimes that extra inch or two makes all the difference between being able to cross a meadow versus having to go all the way around a meadow or whatever it might be. So I recommend boots that are waterproof, but I'm guilty of using shorter shoes.
Okay. So two more questions. I know we're just about at the top of the hour, but let's just get to these two and then we can call it. Um, is there a chance to see polar bears?
There's an extremely small chance of seeing polar bears. So Greenland isn't like a place like Churchill where you can go and you can comfortably watch polar bears. If there's a polar bear that's out there on the landscape, it is very dangerous for us, and especially because we're out there on foot. We don't have a vehicle, a big polar rover to get into. There's no place for us to go. So if we hear that there are bears in any given area, we don't take you there because it's very dangerous. Now, if we heard that there is a bear that's near the coastline somewhere that we could access from the zodiacs and go safely watch it from the water at a distance, we would do that. And that has happened once since 2015, that there was a bear around that the group could actually see from the shore.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if we know that there's a bear around, if somebody saw a recent bear sign, if there's a carcass that we know in some particular area, we don't go to those areas because you just can't manage yourselves on the ground as readily here.
Great. And final question is about currency needed on this trip. Do they need both Danish and Icelandic, or will euros work? Is US dollar accepted? What can you tell us?
Yeah, great question. Credit card's your best bet. If you have an international credit card, so you don't like have the fees, that's your best bet for sure. Iceland has the Icelandic kroner. The Danish kroner is what's used in Greenland. So those two currencies are different. And as you can imagine, just like a store here in the US, like if you try to give someone Icelandic kroner or a euro, they don't want it, right? They want the local currency. But I don't think there's much of a need for that. There was, I will say, there's craft artisans like Craft Workhouse that's in Tasiilaq, and they often have really interesting things. And some of our guests love to buy souvenirs there because it goes directly towards supporting those artisans. And in the past, it's only been cash, and we've just taken money out of the ATM in the case that people want to purchase some of that. Last year, they did have a little credit card kind of thingy that could go into the phone, but it depended on if that one guy that owned that was there or not. So I would say my best recommendation is have a credit card with no international fees, and then you can use that. And it would only be for incidentals. We of course have everything covered that you would need as part of the trip. But yeah, that souvenir kind of stuff. The other souvenir shops, they all take credit cards and that sort of thing. So that's my best recommendation.
All right, great. Well, let's wrap it up there for questions. Colby, I'll hand it over to you for any closing comments you'd like to make.
Yeah, thanks, Kendall. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I hope you're as excited as I am. I don't know if you can tell. I can't wait to go. I already have some of my stuff packed up top in my loft here. And yeah, I'll be out there in 2 weeks, and I'm sure I'll see a lot of you there. And if I don't, have fun. Everybody's gonna have fun. It's great. We always do. Be flexible. We fly by the seat of our pants. Everything happens in real time in Greenland, and we figure it out as we go, and it's brilliant. You're gonna love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I highly recommend being flexible for this trip, but I had the time of my life, so I'm sure you will too. Thank you so much for presenting for us today, Colby, and to everyone who joined us, thank you as well. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out the week's lineup, including registration links and replays, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.